I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier too. Let's talk about automation and analysis and analytics, because when we talk about the real technology drivers, I think this is where technology checks a lot of boxes, right? There's so many things that need to be done to execute marketing effectively. You have to be able to automate as much as you possibly can, right? And then the other advantage is there's so much like live prospect data where like your prospects are and customers are telling you like what works and what's not working, that you have to be able to mine that data and pull out the insights. And my experience has been it's really easy for companies to get the dashboard set up and look at what's going on, but not so easy for them to be like, oh, look at that. That means this is happening, right? Those insights that are buried in the data are difficult to uncover. And then it's really those insights you need to drive your action plan. So how do you recommend companies kind of get from that dashboard stage to the stage where they kind of understand what the data is telling them and those insights are uncovered and they're using those insights to formulate their action plans?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say there's the advice I've historically given people, which I think is still valid, but there's also a new way of looking at this as well that I'll cover. The one I've been like advising people for years here is actually don't start with the data. Just like you don't start with the technology, don't start with the data. Start with understanding the customer journey, and even forgetting like a quantitative element of that for a while. Do the qualitative research, talk to your customers, talk to your prospects, really map out how they're finding you, what's in their head, what are the questions they have, as you get this view of what the customer journey is like, and it's never perfect, but you get a pretty good sense of it. Then you start to understand, okay, well, where are the challenges people have along these ways and how well do I do at like serving their needs along each way? And now you start to get the sense of like, okay, now I've got some high level metrics I can start to put along this customer journey to understand how well we're doing. And then you start to dive in, you pick a spot where it feels like, okay, the performance, at this stage of the journey isn't doing so well. Let's start to run some experiments. But we now know what we're trying to optimize for and how we move them down the journey and what their profile looks like as they get further down the journey, And so again, now you're creating dashboards, but you're creating them in the context of, I know what problem I'm trying to solve. I know the context for it. And that's helpful. But the other thing I would say, because there is a certain amount of serendipitous discovery, that happens within data, and it's been hard to do that. You really did have to be one of those people who was a bit of a data nerd who could love going on these exploratory journeys across these different data sets to like, oh, I wonder what this would be. Most people don't have the time or necessarily even like the skill set or the inclination, to want to do that. This is, again, one of the other areas where I'm really excited about some of these AI technologies, right? Because AI is actually very good at taking these large data sets and finding interesting patterns, within them. I mean, even just playing around with, what is that, GPT-4, ChatGPT, and its advanced data analysis like plugin. Oh my goodness, you try throwing some data up to that thing and like asking it, hey, what's going on here? Again, it's not perfect. It's not the same as having your own like private dedicated data scientist, but it's an amateur way of just starting to like explore some of these data sets to find interesting ideas, interesting correlations. I think it's a pretty cool tool set.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when we start with clients, it's the buyer journeys at the beginning, right? Like you have to understand what issues your prospects have. You have to understand what questions they're asking. You have to understand how they feel at different stages of the process. This is something that I think a lot of people kind of skip over. Many buying decisions are done emotionally, right? It's how you feel about something. And then the rationalization part kind of comes after the fact, right? If I don't feel good about this purchase, I'm not going to spend any time rationalizing it, right? If I'm nervous about this purchase, I'm not ready to understand how much it's going to cost and when I'm going to get it and, what are your payment terms? So I think, when we try to help clients understand the way people make purchase decisions, the buyer journey is always front and center. So I think that's really good advice to start there from an analytics perspective. before we move on, I want to get back to automation, because my issue with automation is you can over automate the process to a point where it doesn't feel human anymore. And this idea of authenticity is also something that's big now. And it's big with AI too. Like, just getting like a blog article from a chat bot isn't necessarily good if it sounds like a computer wrote it. So like, how do we balance this desire to automate everything and get everything done by computers, yet still make our prospects feel like they're talking to people, and there are people behind the company, and the company cares, and there's their story is authentic and their brand has been humanized? It's a very interesting balance that we as marketers and technologists have to figure out, and figure it out pretty soon, don't you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've often thought about this. I know we don't have a whiteboard for this, but if you imagine a 2x2, and there's things you do that are, inefficient for the company or efficient for the company. And then there's things that are inefficient for the buyer and efficient for the buyer. And of course, what everyone wants is stuff in that upper right quadrant of, hey, it's efficient for the company and it's efficient for the buyer. Where automation gets scary is when we do things that are efficient for the company, but they actually aren't creating efficiency for the customer. In fact, they might actually make it harder for the customer to get what they want. That's the biggest danger zone, in automation, is that we lose sight of like, what's this actually translate, for the customer's experience? It's interesting, though, that the other, sort of off quadrant, I mean, let's face it, we all agree inefficient for the company and inefficient for the customer basically sucks. Nobody tries to get there.
Right.
But the thing I always find interesting is in that quadrant where you've got things that might be considered, quote unquote, inefficient for the company, but they're actually very efficient for the customer, and it's a lot of those things where, okay, at a particular moment, I need a human assistance. And there might be some level where like the company is like, oh my goodness, human assistance, manually doing this, that's the least efficient thing we could do. But actually, if it delights a customer and it gets the customer like past a moment where they otherwise could have been stuck or wasted a lot of time or just given up, boy, not just winning that moment, but building that loyalty and building that brand reputation, it can actually be worth it to be a little bit locally inefficient in the pursuit of what is really a long-term lifetime relationship that will be very efficient and productive.
Right. That reminds me of the old Zappos story, right? Like they were not encouraged to get off the phone like most call center folks were. They were encouraged to stay on the phone as long as the customer wanted to talk to them. And there are all these stories about how they ordered pizza for them and they found these shoes at another store and sent it to them. And they really did build that company into a purple cow in their space because of that whole approach. It was very inefficient for the company, but highly efficient for the customer in terms of making them happy. And that resulted in return business and probably extra shoe purchases and all the stuff that, ring the bell, right?
Yep. Word of mouth. Yeah. Epic.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Last but not least, and I don't mean this in like a HubSpot salesy way, but my last topic, because a lot of people ask me, look, we're mostly HubSpot proponents, but we do a little work with some other technology companies too. And a lot of people still ask me like, why HubSpot? And I've always kind of used the platform concept as a way to explain like the real value of HubSpot. Having, everything on one platform does a lot for you in a number of areas. So who better to talk about this with our audience than you? Like how do you see that as a value in the marketplace, and how should companies think about that single platform concept when they're kind of evaluating some of their technology options?
Yeah, and I think I'd make the distinction between a platform and applications, because HubSpot's a little bit of both, as actually most major platforms are. The idea of the platform is that really becomes the center of gravity. And I don't care if you have like one app or you have 100 apps, the benefit of a center of gravity is being able to get all that data, into one common place, to be able to have a central position from which you can orchestrate, those sorts of automations, those data-driven operations. But then the whole advantage of a platform is if it is open, then hey, listen, all the applications that you get within the platform. I mean, HubSpot's got a really great portfolio, Marketing Hub, Sales Hub, Service Hub, and for a lot of companies getting started, actually what they get out of the box with HubSpot is all they need to get started, which is great. It's wonderful. But we've taken a very open approach of saying, listen, as your needs evolve, or if there's some special capability you need, or maybe there's something that's like specialized for your vertical, you don't have to be constrained by just the things that HubSpot builds. Any technology out there, that serves your needs, that integrates with HubSpot, you can get the best of both worlds. You can get that specialized capability and you can get the benefit of the open platform. And so we even have a lot of HubSpot competitors that integrate with our platform. I mean, we have an integration to Salesforce, there's an integration with Zendesk, it's like, hey, listen, give the customer the freedom to choose whichever tool for whichever function they absolutely prefer. And in all of those cases, you still want the platform to serve the need of we're going to help you get more value out of that with everything else working together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Scott, this has been great. Yeah, you're extremely efficient in your ability to explain complex concepts. So thank you very much for doing the show with us. We really appreciate it. And hopefully you'll come back again.
I'd be honored. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks. All right, Scott, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I'll probably just turn this into 2 segments instead of 4, but this was great. Really nice talking to you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Sounds good, Mike. Take care.
Okay. See you later.